The topic is Tony Paterniti's Baba story. Dear folks of Baba, tonight we have with us as our guest the large-hearted, ebullient, and talented Tony Paterniti, who will share his touching Baba story. Growing up in Queens, New York, Tony's unexpected life-changing moment came at the age of 16 during an experience that happened at the very moment Baba dropped.
Dropped. Visual dropped.
Is I don't have it on my screen anymore. Is it off of your screen?
It's off the screen now. Let's see.
I still get it.
Yeah.
There.
There we go. There we go. Okay. Tony's unexpected life-changing moment came at the age of 16 during an experience that happened at the very moment Baba dropped his body in India on the 31st of January, 1969. This was the profound beginning of his journey with Baba that led to many colorful adventures as his life unfolded and brought him to India in the early 1970s. He had many invaluable interactions with the mandali, which he has shared with us over the years. He also spent weekends attending the powerful gatherings with Dr. Henry Kenmore, one of Baba's intimate disciples, whose talks had a great influence on his inner life. Besides composing and singing many touching Baba songs and stints as an actor, Tony worked for years at the United Nations before retiring. He and his wife, Ziek, look so lovingly after their autistic daughter, Elena, who appears occasionally with him on our Zoom sessions. Be prepared for Tony's vivid and vulnerable sharing of his life with Baba. He is open to any questions from us along the way. In his love, Jeff.
Thank you, Marion. Yeah. And I don't know, I don't need to say much to introduce, Tony, because he's quite expressive about himself. Um, I would say that the mandali over the years, when I was in India, we'll wait there a little bit. What they loved was to hear our own Baba stories, how things unfold, not just our humdrum lives, but that led up to Baba entering our life with his love and grace, and that was ever entertaining to the mandali and deeply moving. So, if you have any questions along the way, I'm sure that Tony will be able to respond without stammering or stuttering or anything. Okay, Tony, it's yours.
Hey, Jay Baba.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here tonight, and I have to leave now. No, I'd like to start with a song and end with a song. I
Okay.
think just to kind of set a feeling. I've always made a distinction between like what's a Baba song and what's not. But if it's a love song, it's a Baba song. These are both two songs that I found in going through old recordings of mine. They were written about like 1981. This is called, well, you'll hear it. You hear me on the radio and wonder if I love you still. I love you true, I always will, no matter where you go. So please don't feel I'm torn apart, or that my heart's still racked with pain. It's filled with peace like gentle rain, like it was from the start. I love you still, I always will, with a love that never wavers. Love so pure and calm and quiet and still, that separates desperation savors, gathering all love's flavors. It's sweet and bitter favors. I love you still. You hear me on the radio, singing songs of love. You've flown away, my gentle love, but life is good, you know. It lets me keep my love for you, then lets me fly above the wonder of true love I've learned from loving you. I love you still, I always will, with a love that never wavers. Love so pure and calm and quiet and still, that separation savors, gathering all love's flavors. It's sweet and bitter favors. I love you still. I love you still. So when you hear me sing of us, don't worry, fret, or cry. We never really said goodbye. We still meet on the bus. Your love for me is nonetheless. I found you again as a real true friend, in a friendship that will never end, with no need to confess. I love you still, I always will, with a love that never wavers. Love so pure and calm and quiet and still, that separation savors, gathering all love's flavors. It's sweet and bitter favors. I love you still. I love you still. Jai Baba.
Thank you, Tony. You know, you might have your you were playing left-handed there.
Am I?
Yeah,
Oh, hold on a second there.
have your thing turned around. But
I actually put on a better camera. Let's see if I now. Whoops. Whoops.
I thought it was me.
Is that better? Yes. That's
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bob is on your right again. Yeah.
You know
Yes.
what Yogi Berra said? I'd give my right arm to be ambidextrous. Okay.
So, so I've got a Big Baba story, and I've told this story, I guess in the 80s. I told it, I don't know, scores and scores of times. It usually took about an hour or two. And then I wrote it up, and I wrote it up, prose, nonfiction. I wrote it up in sort of verse and changed some names, which is the book that I published recently, Playing with Fire. But I have the idea that I have the idea Baba wants me to do something different tonight and give more background than is in this story, which is more like a movie than a story, Baba's story. First thing I guess that I thought of was Harry Kenmore one time said, the big mistake we make is thinking in terms of a single lifetime. And over the years, in dribs and drabs and little bits and pieces and the dreams and asking Baba and getting some answers, I have some sense of certain lifetimes. And I want to just kind of go there first, because I don't think of my story of coming to Baba as coming to Baba, because I recognized him the moment I saw him. The moment I saw his picture, I knew him. I knew him already. something else that Kenmore said, Baba told him, "You are my intimate mandali, you are in my circle of 12, you are my apostle." And he drilled it into him, really. And there are two versions of Baba's circle, but the one that he told Kenmore, which he shared with us, was that there are 10 circles of 12. The inner has the two women also. And after each Advent, the inner circle realizes him. And the second moves up to the first, the third moves up to the second, and so on, like that. There's another version that says that they all 120 are God realized after his Advent. But what Kenmore said, that Baba reminded him of times he had been with him in previous Advents. Said that he had been one of Shivaji's generals. I forget the name now. And so I want to convey, I guess, the sense, to make this feel real to me, that being with Baba is so in the present. You can't be with Baba anywhere else but in the present moment. And yet, in illusion, as Baba said, we've had many introductions to him. So that, so like I say, when I saw him, I recognized him immediately. Geez, this is awkward stuff. I noticed from stuff with my wife that I think we were servants of a pharaoh. I never thought that far back, but this year it occurred to me. I always knew as a kid even that I had been a scribe even before I believed in reincarnation. And I think my wife now was one of the pharaoh's ministers, and kind of was not happy that I was one of the pharaoh's favorites, because I was a kind of lower class person, and that person was a minister. And this is just what came to me. I can't say it's so, but I used to have dreams that I would wake up in pitch black, and I couldn't see anything. I couldn't feel my body. It was just total blackness. And I'd have, over the course of my life, I would have that dream occasionally. And my sense that I got at some point in recent years was the pharaoh died, and as was the custom in some areas, his close servants were entombed with him. And so, and then I've heard from through via Phyllis Fredericks, who I'd never met, Baba saying he had had an incarnation as a pharaoh. And I have the sense that Baba, I have this feeling that Baba, I've always had this feeling that Baba appreciates me. It's the strangest thing. But when that clicked, it was like for being willing to be my servant, and when I drop my body, that you go with me. So that goes like way back. I grew up Catholic in this time around, and we did practice the rosary. And it was something the Jesuits, a kind of meditation. I didn't know this then, but you picture a scene in the life of Jesus, and you see yourself there with him. Kenmore had once recommended that to someone who wanted to know, how do I hold on to Baba's Daman? And he had said, picture yourself with Baba and see yourself holding his Daman. He said, because after all, everything that happens in your imagination. So, not knowing it, I was having a real direct contact with Jesus. I was a kid, 12, 13, 14. And I suspect that there was one of those moments where he looked at me and he recognized me. And I did something in that. It was on the road up to the crucifixion. And I ran out to help with something. I have the sense then I had some other lifetimes, including, where I was... There are also some, I have noticed, I know of one lifetime because it's public knowledge and it's easy to remember when you had something like that. But I have experienced a lot of loss. And it occurred to me in this last year, that I was getting some pretty heavy karma back. So there was, in one lifetime I know of, I can tell you later, my mother died of tuberculosis. My younger brother died of tuberculosis. I died of tuberculosis. I lost a woman who I was in love with and was going to marry. In this lifetime, my father got cancer when I was 7, lung cancer. Again, lung is grief in Chinese medicine, grief and loss. And I saw him waste away, and I saw Kenmore. I had a lot of experiences of loss, and I think they're gone now. But I was given some knowledge of a lifetime where I was not very nice and caused harm to people and caused loss to people, that was some of what was being played out in this life. But now let me get back to just the regular Catholic kid in Queens. My father died, and not only was there that loss, but my uncle, who it was the biggest part of the family, they disappeared. They left, and we had no family at that point. My mother's siblings were not nearby. So there was a loss of my father, of my family, and I at that moment went on, and then I was supposed to be the man of the house at 9 years old. That's what they all said. But my search began then for what the hell is this all about? And I was supposed to, I remember they said after his funeral, when everyone came back to the house, so many adults said, now you have to be the man of the house. You have to look after your mother and your little brother and look after the house. I took it seriously. I don't know how I was going to do that, but I was going to do that best I could. There was a big change in my, I had a connection with President Kennedy, and I sent him a note. It was for his birthday, and he became sort of a surrogate for me, surrogate father. And I sent him a letter for his birthday, and I got a reply. It's from Evelyn Lincoln, his secretary, but it was a personal signed note, and he was very touched by my thoughtfulness. And that was in June, and in November he was killed. And that just kind of compounded this great sense of loss I had. But then, for the whole world and for me, the Beatles came in the picture. It only occurred to me in recent years that part of their enormous success was that they woke up a country that was in profound grief at the killing of John Kennedy, and gave us joy and music and a sense of everything's okay, everything's normal, everything's wonderful. And it was certainly like that for me. And my music developed. I had my father's guitars, and I had a band. I was like 14, I think, and the drummer was almost 15. The rhythm guitarist was 12. But we would play, and we'd play in my garage, and a neighbor moved in 2 doors away. These were attached houses, and they were a husband and wife comedy team. And I just loved them. They were so accessible, and they were not like my adults, my uncles, it was like, anytime you want to come in, just come on in. We'd love to see you. Don't have to ring the bell. Don't have to say what time. Just come on in. Bill and Kathy Gibson called me in once, and they played a tape that they had of Mike Nichols and Elaine May, who were a great comedy team. And one day they said, they really enjoyed seeing my band playing in our garage 2 doors away. He said, we're having a bunch of show business friends over. Would you come? And bring your band, bring your instruments, and there'll be someone there who also is a professional manager. So come and play the songs that you wrote. I had written quite a few songs by then. And so we set up in their living room, and it was a wonderful, vibrant crowd, and a bunch of songs that I'd written and arranged. And afterwards, this fellow came over, and he said, my name is Bob Caldwell, and he showed us his gold business card. He said, I'm a professional manager, and I'd like to represent you. And I would take 20%, and we agreed. And he said, and I will, this is like June of 1966. And his first thing was he was going to book us in some clubs in Greenwich Village. This was Greenwich Village when Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Richie Havens, everybody, the soon-to-be mamas and papas, all of them were there. And I really felt that I had felt that I could be the next Beatles when they appeared on the scene. And my mother used to say, you know, you can do anything you set your mind to. And I thought, well, why not? And I thought, here's our chance. But the drummer's father, Italian-American immigrant, hardworking guy, worked hard for his family. He said, I'm not going to allow any son of mine to go into Greenwich Village, which was seen by that generation as, you know, where druggies and drugged out marijuana smoking musicians were and so on. And I felt really crushed, totally crushed. It didn't happen. And then I had taken an exam without even knowing it. They just said, take the exam, and I took it for the most prestigious math science high school in New York at the time. And I was in a gifted class from when I was little. And so I naturally passed. It's a very hard exam, and they sent me to the school. But I was not interested in focusing on math and science. I could do it, but I was just developing a sense. And besides that, there were no girls. It was an all-boys school. And I was finding I really enjoyed girls a lot. And one friend quit right away. He'd been in school with me from elementary school up until 10th grade. He went right back. He said, no way. My mother wouldn't let me. I did my best. I had so much opposition. I finally decided I would flunk out of the school. This is the only way I could get back to my local school, which was a normal school with normal people and girls. And when also, this was the summer of love. No, 66. No, not quite yet. So I pretty much succeeded. By the second to last marking period of the 10th grade, I was told, the guidance counselor said, you know, I'd like to keep you. We've done everything we can, but I was failing everything. He said, with grades like this, you can't stay. I was celebrating. But my mother, and this is a lot of background, but it's the picture of the desperation I was in. My mother said, you know, if you've got your way now, but you know, you're probably going to lose this year. I'd skipped a year in junior high. You're probably going to lose that year. And, you know, and everybody's going to think you couldn't do it. And I knew I could do it. So she said, why don't you at least get your grades up so that you don't lose the year. And it won't look at everyone like you couldn't do the work. And I took off 3-4 weeks from school, sat on the back porch studying these Regents exam books. There were exams that you had to take in biology, chemistry, geometry, and French. And if you got a good mark, a passing mark on those tests, they had to pass you. And so I got 100 in geometry and 92 in bio, 87 in chemistry. Even the teacher that hated me had to pass me. And the guidance counselor called me in and said, you did so well, you can stay. And from that moment, I thought either the world was crazy or I was. And I had to resign to the situation, but it was pretty horrible. And I started searching. And among other things, I had a friend from junior high school who was in Stuyvesant, and we were still friends. I was teaching him some guitar, and his sister was into astrology, and he was showing me stuff, and I was very skeptical. But I was willing to, I was saying, you could say this about anybody, or, well, that's a coincidence. But he said, well, let me draw up a chart for you. He drew up my brother's chart, who was 6 years younger than me. He was 3 years old when my father died. And he said, okay, he has Saturn in the 4th house. And he took out this book called Raphael's Key and Guide to Astrology. And he looked up, and they had a little line for each thing. It's Saturn in the 4th house. It said, death or serious illness of the father at a very young age. And up until then, I was writing these things off as coincidence, but that was too accurate. And then he did my chart. And he said, well, what do you want to know about? I said, well, how about girls, marriage or girls or whatever? And he looked and he said, first jokingly, well, get to the key part. He said, you'll have 2 marriages or you'll have more than 1 marriage. I said, what do you mean? I was brought up Catholic. You don't have more than 1 marriage. It's a mortal sin. You're basically considered married to the same person and you're going to hell. It's clearly God does not want this. And I was, so I said, what's going to happen? I said, is she going to die? And he looked at it and he said, no, there's nothing here that shows death. I said, so what's going to happen? He said, well, either she'll leave you or you'll leave her. And I thought, well, even at that age, I knew if I loved someone that much that I married her, I was not going to leave her. And if I loved her that much and she left me, I don't know how I was going to be able to manage that, bear that. So, and besides, a second marriage means I'd be divorced and marrying again, which was a big sin in the Catholic Church. So I went home and I had this connection, this prayer connection with God through doing the rosary all those years. So I knew exactly where to go with my plea. And I said, you can't let this happen. You can't let this happen. And I just repeated, I said what I said to you, if I love her this much and so on. And I got a clear sense of an answer, which is, this is something you have to go through. This is something you have to go through. And I understood that, I saw my mother suffer, I saw my father. There are some things you have to go through in life. And I accepted that. But then I said, I'm willing to go through all the pain, all the suffering, whatever else is involved. But can't you work it out that I don't have to marry her? Because that's not something you want me to do. And then my second marriage is going to be a sin or whatever. And I got a clear sense of, okay, granted. Now go to sleep. Forget about it. Okay. By 1968, I was really aware of course, Bobby Kennedy was killed and Martin Luther King and the Vietnam War and all that, but something was different. And I have some attunement. I've always had it. It's in my chart. It's clear. But I got books, and I got a book on like different occultish type methods, and I did astral projection, and I did automatic writing. And this was around the time that Baba was saying there's a cloud hovering overhead and I will have to take the force of it on myself. And when I did this automatic writing, it said, I've forgotten the word, I've written it down so I know it, but a dangerous illusion is hovering overhead. And I had the sense, I'd look out the window, that whatever it is that makes life life, like there's something intrinsic in life that makes it life. And whatever it is that makes life life was dying. And I couldn't shake it. It felt like that life energy could be just sucked out of everything and the whole world would just crash into nothingness. And also, I didn't hang out with friends anymore from that September till the end of the year. I was just home. I didn't plug in my guitar. If I played at all, it was with no sound, a solid body guitar. And things continued like that until January 31st, 1969. And I went to sleep that night. And at some point I woke up. And it was like, as if, like, say you left the gas jet on, you forgot and you didn't realize you left the gas jet on, you go to sleep, and somehow, somewhere in your psyche, you know that, and it wakes you up. You go and check the gas, like that. It was that kind of thing that woke me up. And so I walked over and I looked out my second floor window to the driveway that led down to a rented basement apartment where this fellow named Mr. Bellevin, an older man, seemed like a gentle fellow. He didn't speak, spoke English with a thick accent. But there he was standing at the top of the driveway with two other men in heavy winter coats, looking like three members of the underworld, like mafia, three members of the underworld. And suddenly they disappeared into my basement. Well, it immediately kicked in, I have to protect my mother and brother and protect the house. So I ran downstairs. I went to the hall. I opened the door to the basement. I ran down into the basement. Now, what happened next was more real than real. Baba has said, when you experience the heaven or hell state, you experience with greater intensity and clarity because the body is not in the way. The senses the physical senses aren't in the way. So you experience the full thrust of everything that's happening. And that's sort of what happened. Everything shifted into very high gear. And there was a beautiful woman standing in front of me, her back to this, to the open apartment door. It was a studio apartment. The open apartment door behind her. And the love that was filling this space was just breathtaking. And there was a connection between us, eyes to eye. And she reached out to take my hand, and I reached out and I took hers. And it was like this one magnificent, infinite moment. And it seemed like it went on, it was eternal, like it went on forever, but then suddenly time kicked in again. And I realized that she was being pulled into that room and that those members of the underworld were going to do her harm. But the first, if we couldn't prevent it, and she was holding on tight and I was holding on tight, and the energy was just lifting and lifting, and her fingers slipped from my hand. Yeah, you can see this. Slipped from my hands like that, and I was, I guess, sort of hysterical. Her image began to streak like paint on a canvas as she was being drawn into that room. And I felt I was just going to explode. There'd be nothing left of me. And at that exact moment, a voice came from somewhere and spoke. And it all happened instantly, but I could describe it in retrospect. When I was in, I guess it was junior high or elementary school, we'd gone to the Museum of Natural History, and they have dioramas, big scenes from prehistoric times. And as a school project, three of us, in groups of three, we made dioramas. And I had a canoe and an Indian or something, and you put shrubs. And it was in a shoebox. So it was about this big. And I was this size compared to this little shoebox. And I was watching these little characters in my diorama. So whoever it was that spoke, it felt like, compared to that person, I was one of these characters in a diorama, a shoebox diorama. The other thing is, the voice seemed to come from everywhere, like absolutely everywhere. And at the same time, it seemed to come from a place so deep within me that I couldn't see that far deep in me. And all of that's implicit in this one moment. And the word, when he said this word, there was a big flash of light, and my consciousness was just like in light. It was just in light. There was no thinking. There was just being. But the word was, and it may sound weird to you. It's like, I wouldn't be surprised, but the word was a number. It was 303. And next thing I knew, I didn't know right away that I was back in bed. That this was not a dream. That's why I made Jeff change. He had it as a dream. It was more than real, more than this. But next thing I was aware of my lips, just my lips, as thought started to kick in, and they were saying 303, 303, 303, 303. And then I was aware of my head on the pillow. And then like the consciousness kind of just spread wider angle, and I saw that the pillow was totally drenched in tears. And at some point, I like pulled myself together and I got up and what was that? And I thought, maybe the clock radio was on and it was like When I'm 64, and it was like, you know, the Beatles song, and a big, like of almost a tangible voice in me said, no, it was 3:03, 3:03. And I looked at the clock. I thought maybe it was the time. It was 1:45 a.m. No, I mean, later, after coming to Baba some weeks' time, I learned he dropped his body at 12:15 p.m. on the 31st. That would have been 1:45 a.m. In Queens. I got up. I went to the window. I looked down. There was no one there. The guys from the underworld. Everything looked okay. I went downstairs. I went down the hallway. I opened the door to the basement. I went down there. There was no one there. On the contrary, I could hear the fellows snoring inside the apartment. And if anyone had been in there just now, there was the door to the driveway would have been letting in cold air. There would have been motion in the air, and the air was still. So I went back up to my room, and it was like, what happened? I don't understand. And who was that woman? In the experience, this was someone I knew and loved in a way that I had never experienced in my life. I was a kid still, really, and I had something that John Keats, the poet, described. I learned about this later as negative capability, the ability to be at home with opposite things that don't fit together, and to not struggle to make them fit, but just be at peace with things being as they are. And what I did at that moment, finally, because then I said, okay, clearly this is something that absolutely could not have happened. And at the same time, it was something that had definitely happened, and in a very big way. It was something that couldn't have happened, but that it did happen. And then I just fell asleep. And when I woke up the next morning, it felt like life was all brand new. I opened up the window. It was a little chilly out, but I plugged my guitar in the amp and I was playing, and it was as if the world, where it felt that whatever it is makes life was dying, was now flushed with life. It was now flushed with life, and I could feel it and see it all around me. And at a certain point, around just before sunset, the doorbell rings, and it's some kid in the neighborhood. Didn't hang out with anyone in those days. Even the people close to me, I had been reclusive. But I recognized him, and he said, hi. I said, hi. He said, I heard you playing. I said, oh, it's really good. Oh, thanks. You want to come out? Oh, okay. So we came out, and we're standing by the curb, and he's telling me he's got these two friends that they jam, a drummer and a bass guitarist, and would you like to get together with them? They'll be jamming tomorrow night, and maybe see how it works out. Maybe something will come of it. And I was up for that. And but while he was talking, I looked to my left towards the sunset, which wasn't really setting yet, but it was like, and the sky, the sky. I was not a person to be moved by beautiful things, scenes of nature, none of that. But it was like the sky was splashed with color, and it reminded me of like something from the movie The Ten Commandments. And now I'm wondering, have I lost my mind? Because I just had this experience, and now I'm looking at a sky like I've never seen before. And I turned to this fella and I said, "Excuse me, but I don't mean to interrupt, but do you see that?" And he looked and he went like, "Wow." I said, "So you see it?" He said, "Yeah, I see it. It's something, isn't it?" He said, "Yeah." So I said, "Okay, I'll come by at 7:45 tomorrow, and I'll show where is the place. Don't worry, I'll come and get you, and we'll go and make some music." And I ran and followed the sun until it was out of sight. I ran about a mile so that I would not lose sight of this amazing thing of God lighting up the sky. The next day we got together and formed a band, and because I was already much into astrology at this point, and I had a thing where I could draw up charts pretty quickly. I wrote down it was February 1st, 1969 at 8 p.m. And the experience had been the day before. So that's how I knew it was January 31st, 19. And for the rest of that year, I told people that my life had begun for all intent, quote, my life began for all intents and purposes on February 1st, 1969. So, meanwhile, though, going back to the 31st, so I go home, and certain things were very clear. I had to find this woman. I had to find her. And I thought, this will be like looking for a needle in a haystack. But I thought, maybe whoever she is, wherever she is, she had a similar experience, so maybe she'll also be looking for me. But and I had to find out, what was this 303? What did it mean? It was so full of meaning, and implicit in it was my rescue, my saving me from this traumatic thing that was going on with her and the members of the underworld. So I started searching, and the first thing I remember was going about a mile down to Ditmars Boulevard and 31st Street. There was a tobacco shop where they had magazines all along one wall, and I found something that said the astro meanings of numbers from 1 to 1,000, and I looked up 303, and it said, use your talent for business. And I thought, well, I don't have a talent for business. Oh, but I have a talent for music. So business is sort of making money, and I just joined a band, and we got a gig like almost immediately. So, okay, well, I'm doing that. And I went following all these clues, and I was looking for her everywhere. And I could not, although I could see her so clearly as it was happening, it was as if there was a veil over her face in my memory at that point. So I had to use my intuition, my sense, is this the person? And then I started hanging out with, from being a recluse, there's the gang that hung out on this corner, the kids that hang out there, the hitters, the tough guys who hung out up the... I was with the church group, the kids from the St. Francis Church. I spent time with all of them. And mainly being aware to find this woman and maybe find what this 303 was. I'll skip ahead to... I guess maybe it's the band formed. That was great. I came across a book, I think in a local candy store, luncheonette, Edgar Cayce on reincarnation, and I just gobbled it up. I knew very little about reincarnation, but it was yes, and I had the clear sense that this woman was someone I had known and been separated from in a previous lifetime, and I had come back into this life to find her now. And it made the most sense to me. And the other part of Cayce was he talks about Jesus as the Christ, not just Jesus the man. And he did some life readings. I don't know if you know, they called him the sleeping prophet. He'd go into a trance and he would access the Akashic records, and he would get past life information. Originally it was health readings, but then out of the blue he got these reincarnation things, and he was a very religious Christian. He'd read the Bible every year of his life, once for every year of his life, and he didn't know, I don't know what I make of this reincarnation, but he couldn't deny it. And some of the people he did readings for, the one I remember was, you were a child in Galilee when the Master walked the earth. He blessed you. He put his hand on your head. He said, there is a benediction. And he's in a trance. When he wakes up, he doesn't remember any of this. But he says, there is a benediction on this soul that time can never erase. And I got goosebumps because I never thought to question who was that voice, who spoke in that experience. But when I read that, it was like, I could have met him. I could have actually met him. And what else? In the summer and I grew my hair long. This conservative Catholic kid. I was willing to do anything, risk anything, try anything to fulfill this quest and find this woman, find what the 303 meant. And at some point, I walked up to a corner where the tough guys used to hang out, but now they were the drugged out hippies. There was someone sitting there by a turntable, and it was playing Tommy, and he was an LSD evangelist, and he was talking about how you. And I had determined that what I needed for this quest was insight and awareness. I'd had to be able to tune in to the experience I'd had, and at the same time, I had to be aware on the outside when those two matched up. And he's talked about LSD increasing your insight and awareness. I was willing, and for about 9 months, I used it. I enjoyed it very much too. And one time at the fraternity house, I was there, token hippie. The music came on the radio, and it was about evolution of consciousness, and then about the Christ. And it was like Baba was calling to me, and but I didn't know what it was. And then it came to February, and I'm walking onto the campus at Queens College, and you walk up this hill, past the cafeteria. Sometimes people are handing out leaflets, papers. So someone slapped in my hands a Black Panther newspaper. And I just took it, and I kept walking, and I went across to the Student Union building. And there on the outside, behind a glass case, there was a poster about this size. I hope that shows you. And it was a blue pencil sketch of Baba. And it said, Mayor Baba birthday celebration, Barbizon Plaza Hotel, 3 p.m. Sunday. And I had no idea what this meant, but I immediately pulled out the Black Panther paper. I wrote down all the information, and part of me had always been wanting to. One reason I hated that school, I wanted to be connected with this, like the summer of love, the peace and love, the spirituality, that happened in '67, and here I was stuck in that horrible school. And when I was copying all this down, I thought, this is where I'm going to meet the real hippies, the real peace and love, spiritual hippies, And so I decided to go. But I couldn't find where Barbizon Plaza was. And at first it wasn't a big deal, but I started to get desperate. And I'd get on the subway, and I'd walk in the middle of the car, and I'd say, excuse me, everyone, does anyone know where Barbizon Plaza is? On the bus, I asked my mother. My mother was on the phone with her brother, my uncle. I said, ask him if he knows where Barbizon Plaza is. I got a street guide to the city of New York. And I looked up, and there was Queens Plaza, there was Herald Square, there was all sorts, but there was no Barbizon Plaza. And it comes to Sunday, and now it's like getting late. It's 3:00. Well, if I can find it, even now, I went to the candy store. I asked, does anybody know? Even now, I'll be late, but I'll get there. And I thought it was going to be maybe a wine and cheese thing. I didn't know, but it was calling me. And finally, it was 7:00. I knew it had to be over by now, and I'd missed it. And my whole search of the past year had been like embodied in that. And I walked into my living room, and if you remember the TV show Lassie came on, and it had this really poignant theme music, and the kid goes, Lassie, and it was so poignant, and this is what I felt like. I so needed to be there at that thing, and I missed it. The next day I go to school. No, I think it was the day after, which, by the way, would be March 3rd, which is 303. I realized that one day when I was working on computers. That's not what 303 was. But anyway, I go back to school, and they had a thing at the time called Underground University. And called Underground University. And students were allowed to use classrooms that were empty at some particular time to teach things that they knew something about, basket weaving or yoga or art things and stuff. And the program for the Underground University had just come out. So we're sitting around, some friends, cross-legged on the floor, reading through this thing. And there's a class right now on Eastern philosophy and mysticism. And I thought, well, that's up my alley. I had given up, by the way. At this point then, after missing the Barbizon Plaza, I gave up. There was nothing else I could do. I would remain aware, but I had done everything to find this woman, to find this word. I had to just let go. So then I get this thing, and it says Eastern philosophy, and I said, and there was a girl who used to hang out with me a bit at the time, and so we went together and sat down on the floor. And there's a fellow, his name was Richard Terwilliger. He's since passed away, but he was very hippie-ish looking, like Roger McGuinn of the Birds, and he had little granny glasses and kind of tall and baldish with long hair. And he was sitting behind a podium, but he had taken the top of the podium and put it on the ground. So he's sitting behind it. And I don't see it, but Baba's picture is on the front of the podium. But I'm not aware of it. It's like we're backstage before a show is about to go on. And then suddenly it begins. And he says, usually I give these talks on reincarnation and karma or some other aspects of Eastern philosophy and mysticism. But today, I'd like to share with you the experience I had this weekend at the public birthday celebration for Avatar Mayor Baba at the Barbizon Plaza Hotel Theater. And suddenly, Baba's face, it was like it had been behind a curtain, just streaming out light and beaming, like, and I recognized him. I knew who he was. And Twig is saying, the Avatar, and it's like, yes, I know this. I know Baba. Of course I know Baba. And I went home, and I walked into walked down the hallway to the kitchen. My mother was washing some dishes, and I said, Mom, Christ that you've been going to church for all these years. I said, he's been here for the last 75 years. Now, she'd seen me with the drugs and everything else, and she just went, okay, sure. And I couldn't bother to tell her, because I was sure everyone else would recognize him. Why should I recognize him? It was obvious. It wouldn't be just me. So I walked down, and Mike Tetro, his name was, his brain had been a little bit damaged in the service when a boiler blew up on him, but he was an interesting guy. And I had seen Baba's face on a button he was wearing once, months earlier, without knowing who it was. We had crossed paths. I had looked at it. I looked at him. He looked at me. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. And we walked on, and I forgot about it. But so now he was passing by, and I'm telling him about Baba, and I'm telling he's Mayor Baba, and it's Mayor Baba this, and so he's steering. I don't care where we're walking, and we go around the block, and we wind up. I'd never been to his apartment, but next thing I know, I'm in his apartment in his living room. He says, "Wait here a second." Comes out of his bedroom, hands me a pristine copy of God Speaks, plus a photo of Baba. I don't know if you can see this one from here. It doesn't show up in the distance so well. But it's the Imai, taken by the Japanese photographer in London. And Baba, and it was glossy, and it was wallet size, and Baba's looking right at you. And I spent the next days just being with Baba with that photo. And starting to read God Speaks, which to me, I would never have thought people thought it was a difficult book, because it reminded me of the Dick and Jane books that we used to study in elementary school in first grade. See Spot run. See Dick walk with Jane. Here's Baba. Some souls are gross conscious. Some souls are subtle conscious. Some souls are mental conscious. Some souls that are gross conscious are not subtle conscious. And I thought only God could make something so profound, so simple. And I read... but I read John Stevens also, the introduction. That was really my introduction to Baba. I read that first. And his reasoning that, like, once the rocket has gone out of my sphere, I can't judge it. But this is my experience of Mayor Baba. Well, I think I have to pause here because there is no way in hell I can get you to what 303 meant and who that woman was. I assume you're going to want to stop in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, so just kind of keep going, and maybe you'll be able to fill in all the.
Okay. Okay.
Tony,
Yeah.
Tony, it's Marta.
Hi,
Before you-
Martha.
Oh, sorry. Before you continue, I always wanted to ask you this. It's not going back to your story, but I want to ask you something personal about your life with Baba. I always wondered about your daughter, your marriage to your wife now, and how do you incorporate your adoration for Baba with a tremendous job of fathering your daughter, and you've been married a long time, right?
Yeah, 26 years.
Yeah. So
I
what
met,
is
I met Elena when she was 6 or 7 years old. Yeah.
She came with your wife.
Yeah.
She's not. Oh, I see.
She set us up. She liked my music. She liked me.
What's the story on that? Where did you guys meet?
This would be a whole other story.
Oh no, just condense it. But I want to get back a little bit to the present.
We met.
And how do you
We
bring
met
Baba-
online. We met online at the Baba at the Baba internet palace. It was listserv,
Oh,
and
romantic.
we had some exchanges. People didn't do that in those days, but I had. Prior to that, a few years prior, I had put my love life in Baba's hands, and he had
Oh
created.
yeah, you told us about that.
to
Yeah.
clean me out. It's what Bob has given me so many stories, and I didn't know. So I'm finally telling the one. This is the one. And if you want to read more, it's in here. It's get it at Amazon. Look up my name. It's called Playing with Fire, but there are about 7,000 books called Playing with Fire. I didn't know. But all right. So let me see if I can pick up. So, and I had issues. I left all of this out. I had issues about the past and the present and the future. One of my songs was Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. I was trying to make sense as a kid, make sense out of life. So a lot, and death. And all of these things were being answered as I was reading Baba's works and just feeling Baba in me. Day came where Twig and some others were going to the Monday night meeting. Did I want to come? There's a Monday night Baba meeting in New York. So I said, sure. And there were no cell phones. And I did not know that my godmother, who worked for the Beatles manager, the creepy manager, Alan Klein, we didn't know he was a creepy manager. But, and the movie Let It Be was premiering in Manhattan. And she had left tickets for me, my mother, my brother, and I at the box office. But I never found out until I got home because I went with them to the Monday night meeting. And I might have been I might have had not slept the night before studying for an exam with amphetamines. but anyway, when I got there, it was Fred Ella's meeting, Fred Ella and John Bass, and it was a dance studio, I believe, small studio, and tape chairs set up this way towards the front, and on this wall was all mirror, and I think there was a bar. I think it was a dance studio, and someone had pasted, I don't have the picture here, the one I think of as the compassion picture of Baba, and it had been taped on the wall near where I was sitting. And suddenly there's hustle bustle, and some of these guys come in, and they're very, very raucous kind of male energy. We were in a hippie energy. So this guys were like a little bit different. But there was this, in the middle of it was this big guy who was apparently blind, and they walked him up to the front, and he went to the podium, and got behind the podium, and he says, I don't know if he used this phrase, he often did. I like to begin these meetings with the Avatar's prayer, Mayor Baba's Parvardigar prayer. It's a unique prayer. It doesn't ask God for anything. And he starts saying the prayer. And I've mentioned here, it was like an Old Testament prophet. He was, oh, Parvardigar, the preserver and protector of all. And I wanted to burst out laughing. I mean, it was like I bit the inside of my cheek on both sides because I'm thinking everybody here is taking this very seriously, and I cannot laugh here. And then I looked at Baba's picture and I was like, help me here, help me. And I did not actually get more of a connection to Kenmore until September when I started going to the society. There's all these sub stories. I do want to say something here, which is a little bit of an aside. Baba, like I said, Baba stressed to him. Now, I know some people who are close to Baba or in our community who, Sheila Krinsky didn't get along with Harry Kenmore, and she was scared of him, and Anna Rosa Karish, who was his assistant, made trouble everywhere. That's just, that's shorthand for many, many stories. But Baba gave Harry an instruction. He stressed to him, you're my mandali, you are my apostle. And I want you to go back to New York, and I want you to give a talk at this group that was now being set up, the Society for Avatar Mayor Baba. I want you to give a talk every Saturday night. And Kenmore said, Kenmore said, Baba, at one point he asked Baba, he said, I have a busy chiropractic practice, and to be a good speaker, you have to be able to pick fats out of the air to support what you're talking about. And he asked Baba. No, first he asked Baba, I want to ask for something. What? He said, I want chit. Now, chit, if you read God Speaks, chit is part of Sat Chit Anand. It is the divine knowledge of God. And so Baba says, Harry, what do you mean? And he says, well, you've ordered me to give these talks, and I don't have time to do all the research that would be necessary to really do full justice to your order. He said, you're not talking about philosophers' knowledge now, are you? And Harry said, no. And Baba said, I heard this on tape. And Baba, with Erich interpreting, Baba said, oh, good. He said, because that's not chit, that's shit. But in any event, he gave this order to Harry to give these talks. He did these talks for, I think it's 2 to 3 years it was. I came in September of 70, and I heard them until he died in May of 71. Till March was the last talk. And then he did discourse meetings too. But this was a major order from Baba, directly as my apostle to the West. And these talks, someone has them. I don't know if it's with Sherrier, I don't know if it's Larry Karish. Books have come out with little excerpts, but he did a lot of talks, and no book can capture. This is like a PhD program, a master class in Baba. And Baba, if you read Pukhar's diary, spoke about how intelligent Harry was and what a brilliant mind he had. And he was going to use that mind in my service. And he did. And Harry said to him, and he said to Harry, he said, you capture their minds and I will be capturing their hearts. And that's what we experienced. And he said, my nuzzer will be on you and on the group. And you could feel that. It is not right. Whoever has those tapes, those recordings, they need to be digitized. They may need to be made available without editing, because I've seen the publication here. The most important thing I ever heard Harry say was glossed over. It was, instead of verbatim, it was just glossed. Whoever's got them needs to put them in the hands of someone who will be able to deal with the sound quality, because you'll never get what Baba has to give through Kenmore without hearing it. Jeff, it was, and Rich. So I do want to say that at this point, because that was the biggest thing of the next part of my life. Baba said at one point to Erich, talking about Harry was going to be passing away, and but Harry didn't know this, but he said towards the end of his life, and I got this from, I believe, Bob Gans telling it, Erich told him, towards the end of his life, he would be surrounded by a group of young people, and they would be fortunate and blessed. And we were. And that blessing was not meant just for us. So that's really important to say. So I got so much out of that time with him, and there was an intimacy of the connection. And I'm going to say something here that I can't believe I'm going to say publicly, but what the hell? Because reincarnation stuff, I believe my stepdaughter was Harry. When I first met her, she would look at me in a certain way, and she would respond to me in a certain way, and I went, oh shit, I know this. I know who this is. And she walked down the hallway once, the first time they came to my apartment to see if we could live together. They came for 6 weeks. And there was a picture of Kenmore in the middle of a whole bunch of papers and stuff, and you hardly notice it. And she's walking down, tapping on the table, and she reaches over and slaps on his face and says, Ari, Ari. And Elena is nonverbal. Elena is nonverbal. So anyway, I feel very much that connection is there. I don't know. Harry had to deal with the being blind, with being mostly deaf. And now, if indeed my sense about my stepdaughter is correct, he has to deal with having to have someone else help him with every single little thing. The ego really wants to have that independence and self-reliance, and it feels to me like that soul is now being given this very high level of training to be able to accept and surrender to that kind of constant care and not being able to do things on your own. I did get away from the storyline, though. Harry, when he died, I've talked about Kenmore, but I don't know if when he died, his last talk, and this was one of the things that was cut out of that book, he would look around the room, even though his eyes were blind. He would look around the room, and my experience was he'd look right. I'd be going through something that week, a very specific situation, and he'd be talking about something. He'd be looking around the room. His eyes would land on me. He would seemingly change the subject entirely to address the situation that I was going through and solve it, and then continue talking, and no one would know this had happened. That happened many times. In the last talk that he gave, I didn't know he was ill. I knew he was ill, but I had seen him in February and didn't realize he was wasting away. And my father had wasted away like that. It was something about Kenmore's energy was so powerful that you saw Baba, you didn't see Harry. But now he said, I could put an end to this suffering I'm going through right now, and in 24 hours, I'd be a happy man again. And it's at that instant I saw that he was dying. And he said, but to do that, I would have to let go of the Daman of Baba. And he went on to say how Baba had put Harry's hand on it, Baba's Daman. Baba put his hand on top, said, never let this go. Even if you let go, I won't let you go. And Kenmore says, so you see, he's given me an out. Even if I let go, he won't let me go. But I'm not prepared to take that out. And that out was Baba he had developed all sorts of occult powers in his quest for Baba. And Baba had told him early on, stop all of that. Stop all of that. Do not do that. So he could have cured his cancer. He would have had to use those powers. What a thing to cut out of a book. I don't know. But anyway, those tapes should be available because a lot of work went into making those tapes. A fellow named Bill Claghorn was a master of that at the time and the electronics of it. So Harry dies, and Oh, wait a second. So I'm leaving out the part that's my story, though. So in September, I'm not looking for this woman anymore. I mean, it's clear to me that, you know, Baba is love. And to come to love, he a man generally knows love because of a woman, you know. I'm not talking about gender and sexual, heterosexual, all that stuff. But to me, it was like, okay, he used this vision to awaken love in me so that I would search for him and find him. And so I wasn't thinking there was a person out there anymore. And I wasn't searching. I had Baba. What was there to search for? But early on in my going to the society, this young woman showed up. I was 18, she was 22. I was playing the piano in the C room before the meeting started. And she came over and I finished, that was the Moody Blues song, I think. And I turned around and she just beamed at me. And I beamed at her. And, you know, and nobody was saying anything. And I think she showed me that she was carrying the lyrics of the question by the Moody Blues, and she showed me that. But basically, it was just, and because of the astrology, I was very good at seeing someone in those days, and I could tell them what sign they were, what time they were born within 2 hours, and I can't do that anymore. But I have moon in Pisces. I said, "Are you a Pisces?" She said, "No, I have moon in Pisces. I'm a Scorpio." I said, "Oh, I have moon in Pisces and Scorpio rising." And this was like, okay. And then we were called into the meeting. And Kenmore gives his 45-minute talk. And at the end, people would embrace. They'd meet, they'd say, there'd be a hug. Baba hugs. I mean, Anna Rosa tried to make Kenmore think that there was an orgy going on. It was sick. She was a very bad influence. I'm sorry, Baba. How can I? But tell the truth here. With your will. But suddenly I came with all these people crowded in the B room, it was called. Here was this woman, and she's shorter than I was. I'm not tall either. And I embraced her, and I don't know what the hell happened. I lifted her off the ground and spun her around the room. It was a reconnecting. It was a reconnecting. And I went home that night and I was saying, oh my God, Baba, I have never felt like this about anyone. And then I thought, oh, wait a second. I did feel like this with that experience. Could this be her? Because I still couldn't picture. But even that possibility contributed to me going even more deeply into that connection. And the relationship, I was just 18, and I mean, there was so much love. There was just so much love. I don't know. But one time she came and stayed over. But there was a limit to the intimacy we could have, because here we are. My mother finally gave up of trying to chaperone us. She had to go to bed. And we were sitting in the living room listening to the Moody Blues and reading the Bible. But, you know, really, we were just waiting for a chance to get to the clutch. But you can only go, there's a limit. If your mother and brother could come down the stairs at any moment, you know. And the same thing happened. Well, so then it happens that sometime it passes, and she invites me to come over for Christmas Eve. Now, the poet that I think I was got engaged to the woman that he was in love with secretly on Christmas Eve. I didn't know all of this. I didn't know until a year later. I'll tell you. I took a course that included modern British and American poets, and one of them was John Keats. And I started reading his letters, and I knew what he was going to say next. And I knew his brother. I knew this family. I knew I was like reading my own letters, and that conviction has just continued to grow. And he died being separated from Fanny Braun. He had tuberculosis. They sent him to Rome, and he died longing for that relationship, which he had been pulled away because of the TB. And I think, frankly, that woman was Fanny Braun. I have no doubt. So why the hell should I not just say it? But so she invites me to come and spend the week, the Christmas Eve and Christmas Day with her family in Montclair, New Jersey, and it's the day before, I guess it is, and she's going to be picking me up the next day at the bus terminal, and the phone rings, and we had dated a bit, and we'd gone to Fillmore and done other things, and she had a friend, Jennifer and Ray, and it was always sort of like Ray and Jennifer were together, and her name was Alicia. I don't think she's even alive anymore. I don't know where she is, but it was us and them. I get this phone call just before the day of our rendezvous, and she says I have to cancel it. And I said, what? She says, well, something came up. And she's stammering a little bit. And I realize she's there with someone. And she's being really measured in how much affection she's showing to be on the phone. And she's clearly involved with someone else. And all of this is unspoken, but I can't miss you. You love someone that much, you're so attuned to them. And I said, okay. She said, you know what, we can do it next week for New Year's Eve. I said, okay, fine. And I hung up the phone, and I was just, stunned. I was stunned. I didn't, and just at that moment, the doorbell rings. So I go downstairs to the front door. And I used to hang out among the kids that I hung out with in my search, with the kids at the St. Francis Catholic Church. And they had a discussion group, and they had a priest who later married a nun. But he was really good at leading discussion groups on the issues of the day. And I met a lot of those kids, and they became among my better friends. And this girl was one of them. And she's standing at my door, and she says, hi. But looking like just an angel and a beacon of light. She says, hi, you want to go Christmas caroling? And all the other kids were on down the porch waiting for her. I said, sure. And for that whole night, I caroled with that group. And mainly it was she and I. Her name was Diane. And we walked through all the neighborhood, and, and then at some point we get to the church. And peculiar thing, while everyone else waited outside, we went into the rectory where the priest is, his office, I guess, at the church. And he pours us a glass of wine and blesses us. It was like a little ceremony. It was, why just the two of us? No one else came in. But it was like something happened at that moment. We didn't think about it. I didn't think about it. So I went out and we caroled again. We walked about a mile or more. And then we walked up to her, up 76th Street to her apartment building. It was like 3-story apartments. So she was, I think, on the second floor. And wait a second. No, I'm jumping ahead. We just had this wonderful evening. She goes home, I go home. And I was like, I really liked her. And I had some attraction to her at some point, but I had never really acted on it. And I thought, but she's so innocent. She's so pure, Catholic girl. She's very, I said, I've been through a lot with the drugs and I had stopped the LSD within a week when I heard of Baba because I didn't need it anymore. I didn't know Baba said to not take it. But so I never followed up with her. I saw her again maybe 4 or 5 years later on the bus. And interestingly, she had a boyfriend who was sharing Pete Townshend's solo Baba album, and she would listen to Parvardagar all day. And she always remembered me wearing Baba's button. And then I didn't see her again until much later, years later. But Kenmore died, and the society changed. I don't know how this is going to get to where we have to get to. Anna Rosa changed it. She changed it. First thing she did was institute a rule of no drugs and no sex without marriage, outside of marriage. So basically, that was tantamount to celibacy in those days. Because there was not the chance to even get close enough, because as the Catholics would say, you avoid the near occasions of sin. So if you're avoiding the near occasions, you're not getting close. No. So she used that, and we were all a little bit crazy because of it. I don't want to go into all the weird, bizarre things she did. I don't.
But then you went to India in 72, right? You went with the
Well,
society.
I went to India in 72, 73, 70. She didn't let us go during 74 and 75. That's when Alex Sprinkle left the group, because it was like, who the hell are you to tell me not go to Baba? So, but I went 72, 73, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80. Then I left the group and I came in 82 on my own, and 83, and continued. The getting out of that group has a lot to do with that 303. And this woman who asked me to go Christmas caroling has a lot to do with that 303. It all came back in 1979. When I was, if you'd seen my picture then, I looked like I had been in a concentration camp, because life in that group had become so controlled and stifling, and it was interfering. At least one person left Baba because she, as I put it, confused threw out Baba with the bathwater. She said after 10 years, she said, and of course Anna would taunt her about with sexual stuff, snide comments, and she was like a nun, this girl. But the last time in an open meeting, she slapped her 3 times across the face, like in the French Foreign Legion. And I remember this person who I cared for very much. We were like brothers and sisters, and I especially was fond of her. She said, I don't believe Baba is God anymore because I know God loves me. That's how much the waters had been tainted. Someone else that many of you would know, and I only mention names when there's no way anybody I know would know, but someone else who had gotten a phone call from a woman and wound up having relations with her. And word got back. Dan Rosa. And again, in front of everyone at the meeting, she called him up, had him sit there, slapped him 3 times across the face. French Foreign Legion threw him out. At this point, I began, mainly because of the first friend, the woman, the nunnish woman, it jarred me. So I was finally seeing what kind of a mess we were in, and that it was a crazy person. It was kind of like I was a Trumpy, basically. It was a cult. It turned Baba into a cult. And I wrote to Erich. And the thing is, it had been drilled into us. I will get to the end of this. How's that? It's not that far now, I think. I wrote an 18-page single-space typewritten letter. It's in one of the letters from the Mandalis. He wrote back, I have your parents' life story letter. And he had picked out, I wasn't writing about Rosa. I was writing about this thing with this woman and Baba, and what, was. Banana had one point said to me, you think Baba spoke to you? Baba doesn't even know you exist. And out of the 17 pages, that was the main thing Erich picked out. He said, know well, my dear Tony, Baba not only knows you exist, He knows you much before you existed. And then you, as a true lover, now devote your love to him and him alone, and blah, 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 blah. But Anna Rosa used to say, you can't trust the mandali. They have orders from Baba to tell the West what they want to hear. So it was an earworm that, even though I knew it was full of, it was there. And I needed my conflict, because it was drilled into us, in effect, that if you left that group, it meant you couldn't stand the real Baba. You were not up to really serving Baba as he should be served, and all this, and the self-abnegation that was needed, and all this. So I ran into that woman again a lot. She turned out to, I had the experience. Shit, sorry. To go back to that, I'm coming a year earlier. I'm coming back from something or other on the subway. From the society. I'm coming back from the society, which was on Madison Avenue. And I get on the train to get to 59th Street and then take it into Queens. But I get in the train and the door opens, it closes, it opens, it closes. There's something weird in the air. And and then they let everyone out. And they say, you've all got to walk up now, cross town and up to 59th Street, get the Lexington Avenue line, or get the double R to Queens. So now we're all, this whole bunch of us, walking across town. And I am aware of this pounding. It's like Baba inside of me going boom, 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 boom. And I was inwardly repeating, Baba, please, help me to stay in tune to whatever it is you want me to do now. Help me to stay in tune to whatever it is you want me to do now. Help me to stay. And instantly, this middle-aged woman, I guess, comes along and starts talking to me about chiropractors. And I'm going, is it this, Baba? I mean, Carrie was a chiropractor. That was my connection with chiropractors. But she was just rambling, and I'm still hearing boom, boom, and it's getting louder and louder. And I'm saying, Baba, keep me in tune with whatever it is you want me to do here. We get to the train station. I go down, and it's packed. It's thick. You can't walk. And we're waiting for the train to come in. And way down at the end, I see a woman, young woman, standing, walking out to the platform, looking, and then coming back, and walking, and then coming, and her movements are disjointed. And I could feel her distress. And just as the train is about to come in, I'm looking at her, and I realize, oh my God, that's Diane. I had learned a few weeks earlier, I had met her on the train, and she had a boyfriend, and I don't know why he loves me so much, and someone told me they were planning to get married. And I remember sitting next to her, and I'm thinking, if she wasn't with this guy, I would marry her in an instant. But I was really happy for her happiness. I even stopped myself for thinking that, But as I looked into her eyes that previous time when she's telling me about this boyfriend, and it was like a bird. I saw a bird up on the top of a tree branch, a beautiful bird singing this beautiful song. And there was a hunter in the bushes with a rifle trained on the bird to shoot her down. And I shook that off. What a horrible thought to have. What a horrible thought to have. And I just listened to her. So now, fast forward to that night when I'm coming home and I see her. Oh my God, that's Diane. The train pulls in. At the next stop, the stop in Queens, it empties out a lot. I go barreling through the car, and sure enough, it's Diane. And she sees me, and she's clearly been crying, but she doesn't want me to know. So she kind of blows her bangs up in her face, and she tries to smile, and I play along with it. How are you? Oh, and I had a dream that Baba gave me of this whole thing a few months earlier, but that's another. I'm leaving out stuff. And it was really clear to me that basically he wanted to have, he was not interested in marrying her. He was not interested in any, he wanted as my mother might put it, have his cake and eat it too. And she was clearly so shocked by this. Because she was really very much in love with him. But okay, so I picked that up without her saying a word. And we get down to, it was the last stop. We walk down the stairs. There was a puddle. I pretended like Sir Walter Raleigh to put a coat down over it for her to step over the puddle. And then the bus came and we ran for the bus and she grabbed my hand and she was holding so tight for dear life. And we get on the bus and she only lived like 3 blocks from me. And I got out to walk her to a door. And she said, no, you don't have to. I said, yeah, I walked so-and-so the other day. Let me walk you home. And we're talking, and in the course of this conversation, everything that had been troubling her was lifted. So by the time we got to her door, very much like she did for me that night, we went Christmas caroling. So by the time we got to her door, she was actually happy. Whatever it was that had been going on, it had been lifted. And I felt grateful that I had the chance to kind of repay the favor, sort of, 8 years later. And there she is with the door, her apartment door behind her, the building. And love of a friendship kind, but solid love beaming between our eyes. And she reaches out her hand to take mine. And I reach out and take hers. And I let go and she goes inside. And I realize, and as I'm walking home, I could kind of like see a cartoon alarm clock ringing. Like this thing that had been ticking all this time, the moment had come. And I can't tell the whole story of that, what went on that year. But at the end of the year, Baba made it very clear. He suddenly showed me that what was going on. Now she's suffering this thing with this guy, and I keep running into her every 2 weeks. And because Anna Rosa was like, don't get involved with people. So I was not being there for her the way I wanted to. And then when I did finally, it was kind of too late. But at a point, I starting to have like a breakdown. And I said, Baba, what's going on? I've seen my mother suffer. I've seen other people. I've gone, why am I so upset by what she's going through? And Baba showed me the year and showed me the vision I'll call it, the experience that I had. And they just melded into one. And it was like, oh my God, that was the thing where she reached out her hand. Baba had allowed me to experience that 10 years before it happened as a marker for this 303. And again, I'm going to have to cut out a whole lot of stuff. Within the year, I had pulled away from the society, and I'm feeling I've abandoned, I've left Baba. I can't get this out of my mind that I've let Baba down. And what else is there to live for and I happened to see Diane by the train, and we went for coffee. And I was following clues. I thought, because of my Keats connection, and I thought maybe that's something to go on. I said, when you were in school, who was your favorite poet? Of course, Alicia had instantly said Keats, but she's like really resistant. She doesn't want to tell me. She doesn't want. And the more she's resistant, I'm smelling like I've got something here. And she said, well, I know it's going to sound really morbid, but I've always felt a real affinity for Emily Dickinson. And it like, huh? I was not looking for Emily Dickinson. I mean, what? But anyway, okay. So we walked down the block. She was going to look after an old guy, an old man who she looked in on sometimes, a friend of her family when they lived on that side. And we wait by the bus, and she bundles me up, and she does this thing that reminds me of Baba with the man on the train putting his hand on Baba putting his hand on the man's head, a blessing, but like from Fiddler on the Roof, she says, a blessing on your head. And she just go home and take care of yourself. So I get home. I don't know why now. I'm trembling. I'm solid trembling. I jump into bed, and I'm shaking and shaking and shaking. And finally, I realize something. I jump up. I turn on the light. I go pull down my Norton Anthology of Poetry. Now, during those years after that experience with Baba on January 31st, even after I came to Baba, anytime I saw anything that had to do with 303, I would bookmark it. you know, a Chinese poem, we are like rivers that come together into the same ocean. But when the dawn comes, the ocean again becomes rivers, and Baba's the ocean and the river. So I bookmarked them just because. And there's one thing I had bookmarked that I didn't entirely get, but it was 303, and it was actually a poem by Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson was not recognized as a great poet during her lifetime. And she would write these little 12-line stanzas with no title and just put them in a drawer, put them in the attic, put them away. And after she died and she was acclaimed as a great writer, the scholars all went in and they collected all of her poems. And each time they found another one, they would give it a number. So one of her most well-known poems is simply known as 303. And this is how 303 goes. And this was capital letters. I'll just do this when it's a capital, right? The soul selects her own society, then shuts the door. To her divine majority, like in the House or the Senate, if you have a majority, it's law. Whatever you say is law. So the soul selects her own society, then shuts the door. To her divine majority, present no more, or present no more. Either works. Unmoved, she notes the emperor. Unmoved, she sees the chariots pausing at her low gate, like all these promises of being like the really good Bible lovers, you know, the ones who really discipline themselves and blah, blah, blah. Unmoved, she notes the chariots at her low gate. Unmoved, an emperor is kneeling upon her mat. Meaning Baba is there, kneeling upon the soul's mat, saying, just come. I'm here. I love you. And the last line, I've known her, the soul, from an ample nation. Choose one, then close the valves of their attention like stone. And it took a long time. When I first read that, I heard Anna Rose's voice reading it. You see, you chose this woman instead of Baba, you know. But I put it on my mirror in the bathroom. I put it on my desk at work, and it finally sunk in. It finally sunk in. This was the assurance. No one but Baba could give me the assurance I needed at that point. It had to be Baba saying, not only is it okay, this is your soul making this decree. And I am still the emperor kneeling upon your mat. And however, the other part of this, oh Baba, was I was thinking, now what about this relationship? Baba had made this whole thing, and I thought I'd done everything I could, but you know, there's love and there's that real love, that cask of love. But Baba says, don't ask for this or you're gonna have trouble. But I said to Baba, and Baba said, ask anything of me and I'll give it to you. But he who asks for my love will be the chosen one. And I thought the only thing that can fix this relationship is that love. And so I kind of insisted to Baba that I wanted that love to be able to fix everything here, this relationship. But that love sets you on fire. And, you know, he said, don't ask for that. And what happened is I wound up on fire. And it reached the point where I would see, I couldn't keep still. And I would see in my mind's eye, like right here, I would see Baba's face and Diane's face, like as one. And I was at work once and I was like, I couldn't, a garbage man came in and I saw him out of the corner of my eye from my desk. We were a bunch of us in that room and there was something about him but I couldn't. So the day ended, the work day ended, and I went across this room to use the bathroom, and I'm coming back, and then that's where this coat rack was, and I see by the coat rack that garbage man, except it is now clearly Baba in his white sadra, just glistening. And I couldn't even stop because this flame was so compulsive almost. And then I saw something that disturbed me about the thing with Diane, I'm back in my bed, and it's like 3 o'clock, and I'm saying, Baba, oh, and I have a vision in my mind's eye of Elizabeth Patterson, and I'm realizing Elizabeth Patterson had the training, had the grace from Baba. She lived with this love, with this wine, and it was gutting the caverns of lifetimes, but she was capable of enduring that because she was prepared and it was her time. I had gotten in way over my head. And Hafiz has a quote which I've just poetized it a bit, but he said, when the master gives unasked, it's like milk. When you ask and the master, that means it's really a great gift. When you ask and the master gives, it's like water. It's still nourishing and it's good for life. But if you insist and the master gives, it's like drawing his blood. And that's what I had been doing. And so here it was, like the middle of the night. It was already going into December 8th, I believe. And I said, Baba, I'm sorry. I can't do this. I'm sorry. I take it back. Please take it back. Please take it back. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please take it back. And suddenly something has shifted. And I go to turn on the light and there's no light. And I check with the landlord and they're going to take a look at it. But it's like 6 o'clock, but then it's 8 o'clock and they're going to check. I go to work and they tell me I have to hire an electrician, and I said no. They told me at work, no, they have to pay for it. And the landlady says, we don't pay for nothing. You sit in darkness, and hangs up the phone. And when I get home that night, and Anna Rosa had sent me some weird note. She stole my guitar, my father's guitar that the family had split up over. Collector's item, Les Paul guitar. When I left the group, she sold it at a church fair, I heard. And when I tried to, my mother wanted the guitar back, so I was trying to get it from her, and she had someone send me a note saying, Anna Rosa doesn't live in New York anymore. I'm answering for her. It was a lie. She said, Anna Rosa says, stop drinking so much wine. It's making you crazy. And the only wine I was drinking was that cask I asked for that I had no business asking for. And, so I got home from work, and there had been a fire. There had been a fire. It gutted the building. It went right up to my door and stopped. Basically, my life was turned into a calamity, but it was a calamity of grace for about a month. I had no heat. I had to get food from here and there. But I did not have a moment to dwell on my grief at having so done what I did, playing with fire. Really, that's why I've got the title, Playing with Fire. And then my life picked up from there, and it was rather good. But that's a whole bunch of other stories. I don't know. Was that okay? Did I get to the end somehow?
Yeah, I think you did.
I left it.
Tour de force.
What's that?
A tour de force. We got a very vivid picture. You all along the way.
Yeah, there's so much more, but and all of it with Baba's hands in it. So much.
I see your next lifetime, Tony, and I see your next lifetime in creative production of dramatic films. That's what you could be really good at this. You really could.
In 1975, we were doing at the Society a brainstorming session for the next celebration, and they said, and Mike Levy was saying, let's do John Feneri's story. He gets a master's degree of fine arts at Yale, but then he goes off to live in Hawaii like a hippie, and then he gets involved with the mafia, and I'm sitting here thinking, Baba, this is so manipulative and so tacky. And I heard a very clear voice say, they should do your story. And I thought, yes. And then I thought, but it has no conclusion. Just the beginning. It's cinematic. I said, but it has no conclusion. But 5 years later, it had the conclusion.
So it's getting a little bit late.
Yeah.
And
may I give you one song to close it on a better energy?
Okay, and then we'll have silence after that.
Yes.
And don't play the song left-handed again.
Thank you so much. I wound up I was hoping to tell the story a different way, but that's the way Anne Morin had me tell it one year in French to someone from France who had come, and she would translate when necessary. Just think of this as this again from 1981. I found it recently. Just think of Baba singing this. I can feel it when you call my name, when you play my game, when you call my name. Can you feel it when I say hello? Doesn't someone glow? Doesn't someone know? Oh, where the winds may blow, oh, where the winds may blow, where the winds may blow. Oh, will they carry us high, or will they carry us low? Will we reach for the sky, or will we fall like the snow? Only time will tell where the winds may blow. If you feel it, come and let me know. Come and let it show. Come and let love grow. If you conceal it, how am I to know? Come and let it show. Or how am I to know? Where the winds may blow, where the winds may blow, where the winds may blow. Will they carry us high, or will they carry us low? Will we reach for the sky, or will we fall like the snow? Only time will tell where the winds may blow. I've been calling, but you will not hear. What have we to fear when there's love so near? I've been calling, but there's no one there. We've got love to share. Go and brush your hair and come with me anywhere. Oh, where the winds may blow, where the winds may blow. Or will they carry us high, or will they carry us low? Will we reach for the sky, or will we fall like the snow? Only time will tell where the winds may blow. Only time will tell where the winds may blow.
Beautiful. Poignant. Hey, well, let's have a few moments of silence and I don't know, Goer, if you have a last quote at the end.
Yes,
Let's
I
have
do, Jeff. I sure do. Tony,
okay.
your story was very touching, very moving. I really, really enjoyed it. What an incredible journey you've had. And to go along with all the suffering that you experienced in the former years, I have this quote for you. Baba says, terrible suffering is the sign of happiness and peace to come. Great heat denotes the coming of rain. Great suffering and intense sorrow indicate that happiness is about to dawn. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Beautiful. Okay, have a few moments of silence. Hey, Baba.
Jai Baba.
Thank you, Tony. Boy, that was
I-
very descriptive.
I'm so sorry that I did not get to hear anyone feedback, but it was a race to the finish line.
I don't think we've heard the end of your story, Tony. I think we need to have you over again to fill in all the gaps.
Well, the rest is much better.
Yeah. What do you think, Marta? Yes?
Now you tell us the rest is much better.
Well, no, but this is a saga. This
Buy
is
your
a
book.
drama. You can't live at this level all
I
for
don't
all
think I've
time.
ever met a storyteller like you. That's for sure.
Really?
Thank you.
Mhm.
Baba's gift. You know, all you need to be a good storyteller is to have him give you really good stories.
You know, Tony, I still can't figure out if you got married once or twice and who that was.
Oh.
That's what I,
Okay.
And who was the one? And I'm
Thank you.
confused.
No. See, I was racing and I had to leave a lot out, and that's an important thing. After this was all done, and I was beginning to look back on it, and I was living now a different quality of life. I was getting to India on my own, which was wonderful. 82 was great, and everything. It dawned on me. I remembered. I had forgotten that prayer. I had forgotten that prayer. But yeah, that was the woman who I would have married. It's very clear to me now that, and so when, I left the thing out. The priest blessed us with the wine, and that was sort of symbolically was the marriage. And towards the very end, we went to this fellow Ed's house, and I played Baba songs, and this old fellow, he poured us wine and he blessed us. And he said, when music and friendship is there, God is present. And I felt that there had been a thread connecting us. All those years we had not seen each other, and it had just been snipped. And that's when I began to have what felt like a nervous breakdown. And I said, Baba, why am I going through this? So I think that was the person who I was supposed to. Now, I'm in my second marriage now, but that for that Catholic kid, that was a serious thing. If you know, it's not so much that about going to hell, but it's about clearly Baba. I didn't call him Baba then. Baba doesn't like this, doesn't want this. That's the message you get. Now I found Baba is way. I've had to deal with a lot of issues relating to sex, marriage. I mean, Baba is so loving and present in managing every last thing, and there's no. And so whenever that became an issue, it was all you feel is his love, you know. What was I saying?
So,
Well,
so the first marriage was a real marriage, or it wasn't?
No, no, no. We didn't. What I said. Can you just let me go through all of this without having to actually marry her, because I didn't want to have to then divorce and be, you know, marrying someone else when really God feels that I'm married to that one, or Yeah, I mean, I was 16, but still, it
Thank
was
you.
Baba. I said to Zeke tonight, it was like, no matter how weird it might sound to me now, it sounded very legitimate to Baba because he responded and created this whole thing. He put me in the society. I mean, the way I see it is he put me in the society as the alternative to that marriage.
Hmm.
And I did go through hell when that breakup came. It was different, but it was, he kept his promise. Let me go through it, but without marrying her. Now, you know, I would love to connect with this person and give her the whole full story now that I know it, but it's not so easy. It's too bad. She was very sweet, very loving person. I described her back then as being like Marlo Thomas in That Girl. When she'd walk down the block, and suddenly, and when she passed by, all the dogs would be wagging their tails, and all the old people would be smiling. She had a loving, I don't. She's probably still alive. A loving, caring heart, and she was going through something rough at the time, also. At the point came one night then where she was kind of torn between me and this boyfriend, and and Baba had us running into each other all the time, and this one night it came to an apex where she's stopping at the phone call, and she's saying, no, 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 I love you, no, I love you, and she turns around to me, hangs up the phone, and says, she's so polite. She said, I really would appreciate it if you would just walk away and leave me alone. And that was it. I turned around. And I walked away. I walked a mile away, and except for seeing her once on a subway, and she was pregnant, I don't know the story. I did not see her again. I remembered thinking that, what applies to the divine beloved also applies on this level. You have to keep the beloved's wish. So when she said that, I said, okay. But I'm sure it didn't work out for her with that guy, because he was using her. He was not, and she had issues that she had to work out. I had issues I had to work out. Everybody's had issues to work out. But Baba had his hand in it, which made it magical.
Okay, well, I think we better go, and we'll just, yeah. And,
Well,
yeah, and,
Thank you for twisting my arm.
yeah, I'm gonna try to think of, I haven't kind of figured out for next week. I mean, I have Marion in mind, but, I'll, but that's a possibility, or, one of the following weeks, or coming up with a topic. So I will get back in touch with you folks, okay? Anyway,
Marion,
much love.
I'm voting for Marion. I'm voting for.
I'll speak with Jeff about that.
Oh, okay.
I will call you. Okay.
Okay.
Much love.
You're here. What?
Okay, I
Good
better.
evening. We're saying goodnight.
Whoops. Hold on.
Are we
Hello?
leaving?
I thought you all left. What's going on?
We're
You're
saying
You're all here. I left. I was walking away. Beth left.
Looks like going by who's in